All right, we are recording. So hello again, everybody. Welcome to George Washington University and to the Elliott School. I am so excited to meet each and every one of you, though I know it's not originally how any of us had planned. We're still very excited to welcome you into the community. My name is Kylie Stam, and I serve as the Elliott School's Diversity Program Manager for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I'm really excited to see so many people tuned in today as a wonderful way to start our time as a community together. So this is We Are Elliott, Building an Inclusive Community. And I want to say thank you to the Office of Undergraduate Advising for partnering with us on such an important program. I hope you all have had a chance to start reading. We'll start soon to discuss the Common Reading Program and everything that today has in store. But I just want to say welcome, and we're really excited to have you all with us. Just to begin, we like to center and acknowledge through land recognition. The fact that our institution exists on the land of the Piscataway and Nacotchtank people. And while I realize that we're calling in from all over, it's still where our institution resides. And today we're gathering as part of GW and the Elliott community. For those who aren't aware, a land acknowledgement is a formal statement, and it recognizes and respects the Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of our land that the institution exists upon, and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their territories. So I wanted to hold this space today and in this moment as we welcome each of you into our community. For context, part of the importance of today is giving you all access and information around the resources that center diversity, equity, and inclusion at our school. So I've introduced myself. I'm Kylie, and I also work in community with our Assistant Dean, Jonathan Walker, for Student Services, Diversity, and Inclusion. So we are professional staff members who work for the institution and support a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within the Elliott School. Then we also work in partnership and collaboration with the Council on Diversity and Inclusion. This is a wonderful group of students, faculty, and staff members who are dedicated outside of their roles as students and as faculty and staff to the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have helped put together our diversity action plans annually and our strategic planning processes. They've helped put on amazing events and programs and create training and opportunities for the Elliott community. So they are wonderful people. You can find them on our website, and we're grateful to work with them as part of our office. There are also working groups, and there are opportunities for folks to jump in. A lot of times I get emails and outreach for people who want to work with our office and want to support some of the initiatives. And so there are events and programs and different ways to get involved throughout the year. And we're excited to connect with everybody. Also, just quickly, some faces, since everything's virtual, just wanted to show you some faces from our partners in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Community Engagement. These are different services, multicultural student services, LGBTQIA resources, disability services, Title IX, engagement in public service. So we just wanted to start showing you some of the faces of folks who are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and who are here to support you in your experience at GW. So for today, you're all here, hopefully because you've started to dive in to tell me who you are, our common reading. This common reading will be part of our session today, but it'll also be part of your experience in your 1001 course. There will be a reflection that includes a reflection paper that you'll be able to process some of your thoughts. And then today, you'll actually be able to break into small group discussions in just a few minutes, where you'll get to meet some of your peers that are coming in just like you, and perhaps a faculty or staff or graduate student who will serve as a facilitator during our discussion. But what's important to know is that today is a start, right? We won't be able to do it all. And when I say it all, I mean the expansive work and discussion that could come around talking about race, culture, identity, and some really powerful themes in this session and in this book. But there are a couple of terms that I wanted to make sure you all felt comfortable with before we go into discussions, and give you a little bit of context around the book itself and why we chose it. So you'll see on the screen, there's two young women, Winona and Priya. They are the authors of this book, And in 2017, they were actually in a very similar position as you all. They were getting ready to start their first year at Harvard. But what they realized along the way was that they were lacking some of what they felt around insight around racial literacy and feeling prepared to engage in discourse around race and identity, so much so that they decided to take a year to do research around the country. And if you've started the book, you'll have already been able to see some of the stories that have come up in their research. But what I'm going to do now is actually just pull up a small video clip so you can get a little bit more insight into the origin of the book and the authors. Okay, so I'm actually hearing from some folks that they're not able to hear the video. So what I'm going to do is drop the link for folks to watch. It's okay if you don't watch it before the session today. And I apologize about that. But a lot of the context of what the two authors are addressing is the fact that they felt like in their K through 12 experience, they didn't have the opportunity necessarily to talk about race and identity and culture, explore what it meant for them, or how to engage with others that they're in community with, right? And so obviously that's a core value for us in terms of what we want you all to feel like you're equipped to do in this very diverse community that you're a part of now. In the Elliott School and at GW. So I'll share that link with you all and you can watch. It's actually a 12-minute video in full, so you can get a little bit more of a preview of what they're going to be saying. So before we divide you up into your groups, there's two terms I wanted to make sure everyone felt comfortable with, right? I think especially in this present day, it's likely that you've heard about race and racism, maybe even had some experience exploring your own racial identity, right? But sometimes we use language and we're not always on the same page about what it means or where it comes from. And so as described in the introduction of Tell Me Who You Are, the authors break down race as a symbolic category based on two things. One being phenotype, which would be your height, hair, hair texture, eye color, some of those features. but it's also ancestry, right? Tribal affiliation, regional, national affiliations, and the ways those things come together. What's really important to note about race is that it is a social construction rather than a biological truth, right? So there's actually more differences within racial folks who are within the same racial categories or are between them sometimes, but we function in a society in which we use race, right? This social construction to categorize one another, and it does impact the way our society functions, right? So that's something that will come up plenty in your discussions and in your reading. In addition to this concept of intersectionality, this is something that I hear a lot more in modern discourse, but maybe it's not always operationally defined at the core, the way in which the authors and creators of the concept intended, right? So it was coined in '89 by Kimberly Crenshaw, but really emerged from the work of many Black feminist thinkers, right? And so the definition here shares it's how social structures reimagine who we are based on all of the overlapping parts of our identities. But what's really important about that is it doesn't just mean having multiple identities, right? It's not about that. But when you think about gender, sexuality, class, religion, ethnicity, nationality, ability, age, those different social identities, right? What are the ways that that sort of the intersections of the multiple oppressions come into play, right? How does racism impact sexism, right, and interact? So it's digging deeper into the structural pieces rather than necessarily just the existence of multiple identities, right? So I just wanted to make sure that there is that distinction before jumping into these conversations and as you start to think about some of these concepts. And in the book, there's so much more, right? There's so much more insight into the dimensions of racism and other concepts that will emerge around these topics. But I wanted to pull this quote because it's the most significant one to me in terms of our work together. You know, how can we work together to dismantle unjust systems at the root and liberate everyone in the process, right? So that quote really struck me and I think is an anchor in the work that we'll be doing together. So just for your reference, how the small group discussions will go. And if you're here as a facilitator, you can feel free to jump off and jump into your small group space. I'll speak with the students for just a few more moments about the logistics. But for the students, we're going to jump into guided discussions where there'll be, 10 to 20 students incoming that you'll be able to introduce yourself to. You all will establish some community guidelines, and then there'll be an opportunity to reflect on some of the themes from the reading. So I don't want anyone to be scared away if you haven't quite made it through all 3 chapters. There's not a test, but it does enrich your experience in the discussion to pull from some of what you've read. But there'll also be plenty of opportunity to talk about your own personal experiences and reflections as we enter the school year together, right? And so there'll be an opportunity to reflect on some of the themes, and there'll also be a discussion about our community. What community do we want to create together, and how can we make that an inclusive place for everybody, right? And I'm especially mindful of the fact that we're together virtually, right? But we're still creating a community together, and that's going to be really important no matter what. You will end your session today in the small group, so we won't all come back together as a large group. But I want to remind you all that we actually have a program at the same time tomorrow, and that will make a direct connection to race and international affairs as a field, right? So we'll be looking at promoting anti-racism as a foreign policy professional. There's an incredible panel that has been created for you. This event is in partnership with Leadership, Ethics, and Practice Initiative, or LEAP, as you'll hear, and the International Affairs Society. And yes, someone asked if our session will be recorded, and it will be recorded tomorrow as well and available online. But we do hope that you can come if you're able, and because there'll be an opportunity for you to ask your own questions of our panelists. So that's the rundown of today and tomorrow. And what I want to make sure you know how to access your small group. So you should have received an email from the Elliott School, and the subject should say new student orientation and breakout group information. And then within the email, you should see information about today's event and tomorrow's. and a button that says join your breakout group here. So I know that this was such a short introduction and overview together, but we really want you to jump right in and have time with your community and your small group. So thank you so much for coming today. We hope you have a very meaningful experience in your small group, and I'll stay back for questions if you need any support getting to your next meeting space. Thank you so much, and welcome again to Elliott. Yes, so you should have gotten an email yesterday. If you didn't, you can hang back. You should have received the email yesterday afternoon, or what I'll do is I'll actually just drop a link to one of the meeting rooms here if you're still looking for a room to be in.